At the University of North Carolina's Chapel Hill campus, members of the Affirmative Action Coalition hand out flyers, telling students campus diversity is under threat. They're trying to draw awareness to a pending Supreme Court decision that has UNC at the center of a national debate on race and affirmative action. One that could have massive implications for higher education for decades to come. And like much of America, students at UNC are divided. While many told Reuters they valued a diverse student body, there is less agreement on whether affirmative action, the practice of factoring race in admissions to boost minority enrollment, is needed to achieve that goal. Elizabeth Pham says affirmative action levels the playing field.
I think it is very important to factor in things such as race because there tends to be a lot of inequality when it comes to certain minority groups, I guess. So for example, finding extra resources to do well on the SAT, I think is a big example that people often like to use. So I feel white groups or Asian groups tend to have higher SAT scores because they often are able to access those resources.
But others were uncomfortable with the idea that race gave certain applicants an edge in UNC's competitive admissions process. Some said they tried to avoid the topic entirely because of the tension around it. Jacob James, chair of the college Republicans, said schools should focus on promoting intellectual diversity.
That's not to say that, including people that are black and brown isn't important, but I think that it's pretty cynical to say that if we don't give them outsized advantages that they won't be able to make it here. I think that if you allow them to prove their own merit, that they will.
UNC is rooted in the segregationist history of the U.S. South that affirmative action originally was intended to correct. Students live and learn in buildings that were segregated by race when the school first admitted black students in the 1950s. Enslaved black people built some of the buildings brick by brick more than 200 years ago.
We have not dealt with our racial problems. Therefore, there has to be a racial remedy.
Geeta Kapoor is an alumna who wrote a book on the university's racial struggles.
My immediate response to the argument that we should focus on class rather than race is that if we look back into slavery, slavery was an institution based upon race. Jim Crow was an institution based upon race.
The upcoming court decision will rest on whether the justices think UNC has a strong enough case for needing affirmative action to ensure diversity regardless of its past. In oral arguments last October, the Supreme Court's conservative majority appeared sympathetic to the claims by Students for Fair Admissions that UNC policies, as well as Harvard's, put white and Asian American applicants at an unfair disadvantage. UNC and Harvard countered that race is only one of many factors in their admission processes. Sean Camejo, a junior who immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba and worked 2 jobs to support his family in high school, credits affirmative action for bringing him to UNC.
There's definitely a lot on the line, and most of my concern goes towards, my empathy goes towards incoming undergraduate students. Just because, again, I did that entire route, and I understand what it's like to struggle from a low-income background, with all the odds against you.
The Supreme Court is expected to rule on the case this spring.